But anyway, I was really thinking about this in a sense of like kind of like a waiting period for, you know, opportunities to come through. And as of this year, I have turned 27, which I feel like it's a great age to be at, because it's like you're like, because where I was in my early 20s, I just think that I was kind of a little bit more frantic than I am now, and I've learned a lot of things. You know, I've learned a lot of things. So more than anything, I think that I've really developed kind of like an aspect of being in like a waiting period. And it's like, it kind of makes me wonder, like, you know, what am I supposed to do in the waiting period? So for me, as a business owner who also works full time, and then also a nonprofit owner, or a nonprofit, you know, registered agent, I'm the face of it, you know, more than anything else. And so, more than anything else, it's like, I feel like there's a lot of pressure to succeed. So, I actually have a recipe for this. I actually keep it on my refrigerator, so anytime I make it, because there's so many different recipes online, and I finally found one that actually makes sense to me. From there, I just kind of have one that works for me, and I just keep it on there. So I'm gonna put this little dough ball in here, and I'm gonna put this damp paper towel on it. And then to make it hermetic, I'm just gonna tie it up. I'm gonna set that aside for about like 30 minutes. So on the other note, I have tomatoes. I make my own sauce as well. So I'm gonna put that in there. I'm gonna actually, depending on how you want to cut those up. So anyway, like I was saying, waiting period. So generally, when I think about a waiting period, it's like, I think that I kind of adhere to what, like, I think people are saying, like, the millennial culture is where it's like, oh my gosh, they just want to be the CEO the first day, which I kind of really disagree with that, on my defense, because I know that I understand that everyone has to pay dues. So, also, by the way, this pizza that I'm making, I actually prefer salami over pepperoni, because I tried that in Germany. They don't have pepperoni pizza, or at least not from what I saw, and so it's always salami. And then I'm going to put some mozzarella on it, and then some tomatoes. We're going to go tomatoes on top, in addition to the fact that this sauce is going to be tomato. And then, yeah, I'm making basically a mozzarella. It's like a mozzarella. It's basically kind of like a margarita pizza, but I'm just going to add salami. So it's basically going to be salami. But anyway, yeah, so I think that sometimes, like, you can get into a period where you feel like you're kind of stuck. And I kind of feel that way sometimes, because I think at my workplace, we've undergone a lot of changes. So with my boss still being on the bench, we actually just recently, it's now September, as of July, we lost our staff attorney. She decided to move on and work as a real attorney for a law firm. And her moving on was kind of hard, because she was my work best friend. And, you know, for the most part, we both all started as one unit together. And, you know, it's really difficult, like, when you undergo changes. And then part of the thing that I noticed is that, you know, the fact that around me is that, you know, my boss has you know, professed that she thinks that I am a very valuable person in her office, which I do enjoy. I do appreciate that she thinks that. But however, I do realize, and I had asked her, because she said, you know, what can I do to make you happy? You know, what can I do to make you feel like, you know, because I need you to stay. I need you to stay. And so I was like, oh, okay. And I came back to her and I said, hey, you know, what would be really interesting is, like, if I could, you know, figure out how to get a pay raise, because I just feel like I'm the least paid person in the office. So a lot of times I feel like I have to compensate, because my boss, obviously, she went to law school, because you can't be a judge unless you know, practice. That's still practicing law. And then the staff attorney or law clerk, because she hasn't gotten any notification that I am aware of that she passed the bar, but basically went to law school. So I'm just like, I'm the least paid person here, it feels like, but yet I'm doing so much. You know, I will be honest with you, being an executive assistant to someone, or in my place, they're calling it judicial support specialist. They do the same thing. you know, and then I was informed that like legislative aides who do the exact same thing, their starting pay is a lot higher than mine in the judicial branch. So and that's nothing to really, I think, I mean, when you really think about it on the surface, it's like, yeah, that's like a big discrepancy, you know, to get paid like $20,000 to $30,000 more than what you're actually making, you know, depending on the work experience, depending on the pay grade. But it's like, because at the end of the day, I mean, I realize that if my boss thinks that I have all this value that, you know, she professes that I have, and then your pay's not reflective of that, and she has no control over that, because that just has to do with just government. We just work for the government, and government pays us what the budget allows, you know. And so it kind of made me really think about the fact that, like, where am I going? Where's my direction? And it's like, I went through this kind of like a quarter life crisis like 2 years ago, like, you know, the 25-year, it's like a quarter life crisis. And I felt like, you know, I really need to think about this, because I went to school for fashion, and then I worked in the industry prior to, you know, pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic kind of made me reevaluate some things that maybe that industry wasn't what I needed or what I really wanted to do. And so that's kind of how I ended up further developing into other skills that I felt like I had added value. That's kind of where all these languages came from. And the part of it was that I really was intrigued by the fact that, why is it that we're so globally advanced, but yet as a country, we don't have as many bilingual, trilingual people as most people do. You know, you can travel to almost any country and somebody knows some English, but it's like, we don't really know how to go to any country and just be able to communicate with people. And that doesn't mean that that's, you know, the norm for everyone. I mean, it's a stereotype. People will tell us like, oh yeah, Americans. Like, I mean, like when I was in Europe, just people being shocked that I, as an American, can speak, you know, their language at a comprehensible level. So I don't want people to be shocked. I want it to be normal that we speak this. You know, I discovered other interests, and I realized I want to get those things off the ground so I can live kind of a freer life. And for me, I feel more or less, I'm sometimes afraid to admit it, but it's like I really see myself doing something along the lines of being in a position of leadership, because I feel like I'm a very visionary type of person, and I have a very much oversight type of mentality, because I like to make systems and figure out how everybody works together. Like, for example, on a language standpoint, I don't think I would ever want to be a teacher, because you're managing a bunch of different people, and I like to really personalize. That's how I normally teach with, you know, the students that I have. But on the same time, pay for teachers is not the greatest. It's not really seductive at this point. And then also is I see myself looking at figuring out better ways to do that and connecting different people, like, you know, working with teachers to figure out better solutions to teach. Working with, like, you know, administratives of how, like, you know, curriculum writers, like how do we, you know, find ways to effectively produce, you know, citizens in society, you know, because I think that the people who are making the decisions is pretty much where, you know, the room that I want to be in. And that doesn't mean like I want to be the boss of everybody, because I think that sometimes when people think leadership, sometimes it can kind of be stigmatized into like bossiness. But it's just more so as I just see myself as a visionary, of course, like trying to figure out how to bring people together into a working system, you know? So on that note, it feels like, you know, I know what direction I want to go in, but my biggest hurdle is trying to figure out how I'm going to get there. Because especially like with my nonprofit, I mean, it's doing pretty well, but I feel like it could be doing better, you know, getting to a point where I can leave my job. And don't get me wrong, I love my job, I love my boss. I think that I've learned a lot, and I learned a lot more about my capacity. I realized that I've been more capable of doing things than I actually thought I was going to be able to do, more or less. So I don't know. So like with, you know, certain people moving on, and then internship season was over. So all of our interns, they went back to school, or they graduated, or whatever it was. And especially like with interns, one of the things I realized was, what do you do with interns? I was like, I was an intern, and I remember what I did. And I was like, well, one thing I didn't want to do is photocopy stuff all day. You know, like, oh, like go get coffee or whatever. You know, I felt like I really wanted these interns to learn something. And I was like, hey, y'all don't know how to write a court order? All right, let's gather around and look at one. Oh, you guys don't know how to read? It's like, all right, today we're going to learn how to read a criminal file. You know, you're going to learn what's in here. that kind of thing. So I just feel like I want people to get something out of it. And for me as a avid learner, that's where my, my heart comes from. I mean, I even think about it like from a spiritual standpoint, is like Jesus from a very young age, he had these abilities, he had these skills, he had the power to be able to heal and create all these miracles, but he didn't really come on the scene until he was like a full adult. So my theory is that, going through, I mean, I can only imagine Jesus at 16 saying like, is it my time yet? And most of the time my, my faith really does drive a lot of it. Cause I think that, especially with my boss. So even though like there's certain things that, how she runs her office, which I may not always agree with, which is kind of a given because we're all human beings and we're all subjective to our own points of view. She's very much like a very, excited person. And when she comes in the morning, I'm sometimes not prepared for it because I'm usually a quiet person. So, how she kind of like, she's like, I want the door open, like, this thing, like, all these different things, how she runs her office, it's great. But at the end of the day, I realized that, because I know sometimes people struggle with this, it's ego. Ego gets in the way. And that's one of the things I really have worked on is you gotta let go. You gotta dismantle your ego, because at the end of the day, I know my place. My name's not on the door. It's her name. So I realized that even in that waiting period where you're like, I'm just eager to just get out and do, the worst thing I think you could do is just be so eager that you just quit or move on to another opportunity that you're not ready for. Because at the same time, I really think about the fact that what are you getting out of it? What are you learning about yourself? You may not, for me, law is something I really do not ever really plan on going into. I don't plan on going back to school for law. It's not something I really am interested in. But I really just think about what are you getting out of this experience, and really focus on that, because I think that, especially like with the millennial generation, is we have to have a purpose in what we're doing. So especially when I transitioned into this job and I was working, I first got here, my boss and I, we started together and we kind of had to figure out how to do a job that we really have never done before. I was immersed in an industry that I never really ever planned on working in, but I felt like it gave me more freedom because I was working an overnight job. And so at the end of the day, like when I get frustrated or, because sometimes, I do get a lot of free time at my job, and sometimes I want to work on, other things like my business, whenever I have free time, that's what I want to do. And of course, phone rings and people come in and, they want to chat and things like that. That's part of it. So I realized that, that's just part of the job, but at the end of the day, I tell myself, would I rather go back to working that overnight job? No. So I realized is that you have two options, you can't, so, because sometimes people are just like, oh, I just can't handle it, whatever it is. First of all, I don't have an issue with my boss to a point where I would want to quit or I would hate my job, I don't have that sort of mentality. But sometimes people do, and they're just like, I'm just going to quit and I'm going to figure it out. And I'll just be honest with you, I think that's a terrible thing to do. I think that sometimes we just need to, learn where our place is and just figure out what we can learn from this. Like, I mean, I even think about one of my favorite films, and I remember, as you guys know, I went to fashion school. So you could not go to fashion school and not have seen The Devil Wears Prada. It's like, yeah, sometimes people have bosses that are just insane. Actually, if you've actually read the book, she's a whole lot worse than the book, but what I really do appreciate is the fact that it's like, yeah, there are challenges in life, and my mindset has always been that life is going to be suffering, it's going to be pain, especially for me as a believer of Christ, is that it's literally in the Bible. You are going to suffer. It's just part of it, because it's like, it's easy to do like, things that feel good. It's so easy to do things that just sit back in the cut. But if you really are trying to get ahead and go far with your life, is that sometimes you have to develop a pain tolerance. For me, as a person who is very highly sensitive person, my nervous system gets agitated. And, there's some days where I'm just like, I can't handle it. One of the things I do is I try to take mental health days. You have days, if you have the ability to do so, take them. They're useful. Clear your mind. Sometimes I take mental health days so I can really just get into my business, because sometimes my business stresses me out. I'm like, I don't have time to work on my business. That's the ultimate goal. And so sometimes I might think, okay, just take a mental health day. Like, because the thing is, sometimes getting things done helps your mental health. I will be honest with you, it really does. You know, I told my boss, I was like, I'm going to take a mental health day at least once a month so I can clear some things. Because my schedule gets really booked up very easily between, of course, you know, work is going to take up, you know, a big chunk of your day every day. But then after work, I have, you know, students that I'm tutoring. I have, you know, church-related things. I may have, you know, social events and things like that. So most of the time I really rely on my calendar to time block what, you know, what I'm doing, so I can kind of figure out when my rest periods are going to be. You know, so I just think that, you know, time blocking and getting realistic about how you're going to get your things done, and just taking care of yourself. So, you know, sometimes I just think that when we're kind of in a place where we feel like we're frustrated with our job, like, because at the end of the day, it's like my job is challenging in certain ways, especially emotionally challenging, because you're dealing with, you know, criminal activity. You know, we're dealing with people who've committed crimes. And so sometimes you can take that home with you. So sometimes it can make it really difficult to show up to your job in a way that you would really want to be, you know, 100%. Because sometimes, like when my boss comes in, she has a very big sunshine demeanor. And I'm like, some days I'm just like, I cannot get on the same level. I'm like, you're like, what, like in your 60s, and I'm trying to keep up with you. You know? So I realize that it does affect how you show up. You know, so I think that, you know, just take those days, because sometimes we get like in this workaholic manner, especially in America. We're very known for our workaholic culture. We just want to, you know, like, oh, I just gotta work. I gotta prove to my boss that I'm serious about this job. There's no doubt, I'm pretty sure at some point, you know, that they know you're serious about your job. And of course, like there are times where, you know, all of us, we want to have some sense of control in our lives, and that's great, you know. That's true. You know, like I do want to be my own boss. That's just kind of how it is with entrepreneurship. I just feel like I can't do the things that I want to do when you're working a job, you know, your whole life. Right now, it's just a temporary situation. So that's why I'm always thinking about what can I get out of this? Because at the end of the day is that, you know, my boss, she has like an 8-year term. So I'm like, do I really, by the time she gets to her 8th and final year, because she's retiring after that, she doesn't plan on, you know, running again, you know, but once she gets, gets to her 8th year, which I'll be like about 34 at that time, where do I really want to be? You know, I'm going to be 30 in another, you know, 3 years. So I'm thinking, where do I want to be? And I think that when you kind of just, you know, sit in the sense of like, let's say entitlement, like, oh, you know, I just really, you know, I should be doing this. I should be, well, why aren't you doing that? You know, like trying to figure out, you know, like I said, with my job, I realized I have a lot of free time. You know, I'm sitting there bored at my desk. Work on something that's going to better yourself. You know, I'm very fortunate that my boss lets me, you know, do certain things. Like sometimes, like on Monday, she'll let me go to this French class that's at my local literacy center. You know, she'll let me participate in that. Because at the end of the day, my work's done. Like an idiot could do my job. I will be honest with you. I feel like it sometimes. But, you know, or, you know, there's a fact that like on Wednesdays, I go to like there's a church service that's up the street on Wednesday afternoons. I go, you know, finding ways to fill myself with a spiritual, you know, sense of, you know, being. And I think that everyone should have some sense of spirituality, especially something positive, because for me, with, you know, my faith in Christianity, over the years, I have, you know, been more consistent with deep diving into, you know, the Bible, for example. And really trying to hone in on affirmations. Like one of the things I've been recently telling myself over the last few months is that people want to know you. So like, especially when you're talking about your business, or some people, myself included, feel like, oh, I don't want to be salesy about my business. I don't want to be, you know, perceived as such or whatever it is. No, you need to talk about your business. You need to talk about what you're doing. You know, I mean, there's a time and place for it, but you know, you need to be, you know, adamant about finding people to support what you're doing, because otherwise, you know, it's just wistful thinking. It's because you can't just build like a business. You can't build something off of just you. You have to share it. You know, what are you doing in your free time? Like if you're at your job and let's say you do have free time, how are you taking advantage of it? Are you just sitting there on your phone, scrolling on social media, or are you actually trying to figure out a plan to get work? Because the one thing is that Nowadays, it used to be like, midlife crisis, but now people, especially my generation, where we're getting to like our late 30s, early 30s, and we're just looking at ourselves and we're thinking, okay, what should I be doing? I feel like I should be doing something. We have this sort of like existential crisis almost, and so I just think that, we really should be thinking about, what are we doing to better ourselves? So that's kind of where I'm at. I think that leadership, you can always find some sense of leadership in your job, because if you plan on being a leader or leading a company, how can you lead, a bunch of people if you can't lead things? Like, the way I see it is, okay, if you want to be a leader, you want to be in charge, are you able to understand that if anything goes wrong, you are the point person that they talk to? And most of the time at my job, anybody who wants to talk to the judge talks to me. So in my end, it's like, okay, am I willing to, get blunt, take the blunt if something doesn't go right? If I make a mistake, guess who's gonna get the responsibility for it? Are you willing to take that on? The other thing that is like, for example, something that new for me in this job is interns. How can you manage an entire company if you can't help 3 people learn what they're there for? I really want to make sure people are getting things out of that, because at the same time, I had our staff attorney, the one that left. She was like, I don't know what to do with interns, and I'm not patient enough to teach people things. Well, that's my area. I'm really good at explaining things. All these different. I'm very expressive when it comes to okay, what do you want to learn? What do you want to get out of it? If you can't manage like maybe 1, 2, 3 people in your own office, what makes you think you can manage a team? Learning to ask for help is a really big key for me. Like it's my sacred word, for the year is help. Because sometimes, even for me, I'm just stressed out and I'm like trying to get all this stuff done in a certain way. And it's like learning to ask for help and delegating, because you can't do it all by yourself, and it'll really slow the process down, So really, like learning what kinds of skills do you need? Because at the same time, it's like for her, like one of the things that we have is that when certain cases come up, people call we get press that calls the judge and ask certain questions about her decision making, or sometimes they might call and say can I bring a camera? She's on TV quite a bit, especially when we get big cases. So it's like, are you willing to be the face of that? Because at the end of the day, when she makes a decision, she's the one that basically is, the one that they're going to be, looking at community, especially because people voted for her to be on that bench. So I think at the end of the day is, if you're in a waiting period, especially when you feel like people around you are moving on faster than you are, which is something that for me, I struggle with as well. But that's okay. You're going at your own pace. This is what I'm telling you and I tell myself, is you're going at your own pace, and God will bring the next opportunity when he feels like you're ready, when you are ready. And sometimes we might not feel that we're ready, but sometimes it's just like, okay, like God, universe, whatever you believe in, is going to say, this is the opportunity, because I did not expect to have this job. My, my aspect was just, I'm working overnight and I'm working my business during the day, but then this opportunity came up to where I actually get to be around a work environment where people want to show up, people appreciate who I am. So it took me some time. And even though I may not be in the same direction that I thought I was going in, with the fashion industry. But the thing is, I think a career is not the same thing as a calling. Calling is like a spiritual thing. Because sometimes I'm asking God, what am I supposed to do? Like, where am I going in life? Where are you taking me? But at the same time, I have to trust the process that you're exactly where you need to be. I'm going to get this pizza made. And guys, love you. You're great.